everybody. Welcome to International Watercolour Masters 2024. It's very nice to see everybody. The sun's shining, and the sun is shining in here as well. And we've got a packed program for you today. Some of the best artists in the world, and a fantastic exhibition. Please take your time and look round. The other thing is that we're making watercolour history, because at IWM, for the first time ever, a watercolour festival, an elite watercolour event, is being broadcast to the world by IWM TV. So right at this moment in time, people from all over the world are tuning in to this show. We'll just find out how many are tuning in now. Kevin? 13,500 people. I think that's would you like to say hello to them all? Because they're all over the world. It's the middle of the night for some of them, so I think we should say hello from Shropshire, England, Lillishall Hall, after 3. 1, 2, 3. Hello! It's a bit quiet, actually. Won't wake anybody up. Have another go. Hello! Excellent. Well done. Have a banana. No. Okay, on with the proceedings. It's a great pleasure. Our next guest, a lady from Arkansas, USA, who's making a big name around the world, particularly in the States, already in multiple galleries, got lots of collectors of her work. It's a very great honor to present for the first time at the International Watercolour Masters her UK debut. Please welcome the fantastic Carrie Waller.
Hello everyone, can you hear me? Tell me you can hear me. Okay, I'll try to keep my head out and my voice projecting. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for all those watching on IWM2024. Thank you to David. We're going to do a nice demo today for you. I paint realism and I paint glass, so that's what I'm going to be doing for you today. I do want to show you a few things about my process, so I'm going to hold this up so you can see. I paint 4 series, and I have them, if you look on the screens, light bulbs, bottles and jars, Japan. I lived in Japan for almost a decade, and a tea series. We'll be painting today out of my tea series. I set all of my still life stuff outside in the bright sunshine, or I'll show you the alternative, like this one with the lights would be indoors. So I have a little card table and some surfaces that I take outside, and my neighbors think I'm crazy, and I set my still life up, and I'm able to turn it and move it around to cut the light exactly where I want it, and then I photograph those images. So this is what a thumbnail would look like in my camera. It's small here, but I'm able to see what kind of jumps out at me and what I want to Photoshop and make better. So here is a photo that would come out of one of those photo sessions that I might paint that's been edited, so I'll Photoshop it. And then here is a painting that came out of a session like that where I've taken photographs. When I'm setting things up and doing this process, I sit there and take probably over 100 photos, all different angles, trying to get the best that I can, and hopefully get a series that I can paint out of one photo session. So if I'm indoors, like this one that I'm going to be showing you today with the lights, I've got you see my little cabinet, and I've got a little jar set up in there with fairy lights. And then here's a photograph that would come from that process. And then here is an edited photograph. And there's the painting at the end of that process. So I paint cellularly, so I'm going to go through a whole little painting. This painting is called Carrie. So I paint like a printer, across the page very cellularly. And I do a lot of controlled wet-on-wet sessions in between. We're going to go through that today, but I just wanted to show you from start to finish a similar painting. I love to establish my values. It's very important to establish them in the very beginning so that I know that I'm getting my colors saturated the way I want to. So as you can see, I've already established my values as I'm going across the page. So it's finished. I know from step one if this painting is working. And here it is about halfway done. Here it is almost completed. And then here's the completed painting, Carrie, which means light in Japanese. And then this is what we will be painting today. And this one is called Afterglow. So I'm going to tell you just for a second about my paints, because everyone always wants to know. So I have made my own pans. So these are all Daniel Smith watercolors. I've made my own pans in these little containers. They look like little pill boxes, don't they? So I got these at a Japanese hardware store while I was living there. And the nice thing is they hinge on the back, and they have a hole in the center. So I have a little bungee cord. I put them through, and they all hang like a chain, like you can put them around your neck. And that way when I'm traveling, they're easy. You know, when I came to the airport, I had everything in my backpack, and I didn't have to worry about having tubes of paint. So that's what I'll be using. They're labeled on the bottom. You can see they're well loved. See my labels that are coming off. And then I have them swatched on cards. So this is number 7. Then I can find my number 7 card, and I know exactly what colors are in there. So when I take my photo reference that I'm painting from, I can kind of shop my swatch cards and decide which colors I want to use for a painting. I always have my favorites that I go back to, but I like to introduce new colors from time to time. So today, we are using a lot of greens and oranges and pinks in this painting. I paint with size 4 brushes. I know a lot of people don't use those very often, but size 4, size 8. I use a lot of masking fluid. You can see everything in here in the blue is the masking fluid. So I'm doing these controlled wet-on-wet washes, so I need a lot of this masking fluid in there to keep my bright sparkles in my glass. So we're going to dive into it now, and it's nice to paint with your iPad because I'm able to zoom in on a section. I don't know if you can see that. See how nice and large I can get? So you can zoom in on a section, or you can zoom all the way up. So that's really nice about painting with an iPad or a screen like that. And this is my ruling pen. Did I mention that? I use a ruling pen to apply my masking fluid. If you've never seen one of those, it's a calligraphy drafting tool. This one's nice because it opens, it levers to be able to clean. But I get really precise amounts of masking where I want it. And that's almost an art form in itself. I know a lot of people don't like masking fluid. It's a love-hate relationship. But with this tool, I'm able to get it very thin and then have little cleanup at the end. And I will show you how I resolve and soften whenever I need to. Okay, so we're going to dive in. I always like to start with a color that is one of the lighter colors. I like to map my shapes in. So we're going to come over here. And this masking fluid also helps me understand where I am. So this is Bismuth Vanadate Yellow. It's an opaque yellow, but you can use it in a transparent fashion. I like this color because it's what I call a bully color. Do you know how some colors recede and the other colors take over? Well, this color comes in and it won't let things take over. So that's what I love about that color. So we're going to start with our lightest. I'm going to now move to Quin Gold, and I'm going to come in around this Bismuth Vanadate with the Quin Gold. And I do paint quite slowly, so a painting like this, I have gotten it down when I teach a lot of online workshops and workshops in person, so I've gotten it down where I can get a pretty quick one done in about 9 hours. But if I were entering this in a competition, I would spend more like 15 to 20 hours on this painting. Of course, we do not have that kind of time today. So I have some tricks up my sleeve to aid us in our time crunch so that you can see a completed painting. So see how I'm using this wet on wet? I didn't come in with water. I always bring pigment to the table when I'm coming in. Here comes Undersea Green. This is a beautiful color. And I'm going to start establishing my values. So it's important that I get these darkest darks established right away, because I don't want to waste a lot of time having to go back and paint this 16 times. I want to get it, a lot of it going as soon as I can. So if my bismuth vanadate, so if that paint starts to crouch in, I'm going to come back and drop in some more bismuth vanadate and see it kind of pushes it back out. We're going to come down with our undersea green still. We've got this nice quin gold underneath it. And add a little more quin gold right in here. Now this series, because I am a still life painter and I have gotten a reputation for painting glass, I had to figure out a way that I could translate experiences and travel and those into a still life. So this is my interpretation, this series, of my time living in Japan. We lived there for over 8 years, right outside of Tokyo. And if you've ever visited Japan, it is sensory overload. Look at see how that bismuth comes back out and pushes things out. And I wanted to kind of capture my feelings of being in the city in a still life. And so this, more quin gold, this is one of my interpretations of that, just lights and stacked things and pretty things and kind of a cacophony of senses all in one. Here is undersea green. Let me know if my head's in the way. I'm going to back up. And you're welcome to ask questions as I'm demoing. I'm going to paint around this little teacup. And my masking has mapped in some nice spaces for me so I know where I am. I want to get this glow in the middle. I'm going to use Aussie Red Gold. It's another beautiful color. Right here around these highlights in the center. And you see I'm letting this water do its thing. I'm going to get a little sap green in here. And another thing you might notice, I don't have a palette. So I don't know how many of you can relate, but I had stacks and stacks of palettes because I hated to get rid of colors that I had mixed that I thought I might need again, or they were beautiful colors and a little lifting. So I was becoming quite a palette hoarder. Anybody relate? So I decided to just ditch the palette. Plus I was moving and teaching, and I wanted to be able to take everything with me easily. And so I ditched the palettes and just started mixing on the paper. Look how these beautiful colors are mingling together, right? And I'm having my colors do this right here in real time in front of us. So it can be a little scary, but also magical. That's the magic of watercolor, right? We want these mixes to happen. So I ditched the palette, and what resulted were cleaner paintings and no mud. I'm going to take a little paper towel. I got into that area, so I'm just using my paper towels and eraser. Some more bismuth vanadate. We're coming in light. And working our values in at the same time. Okay, I'm going to get a little of our Aussie Red Gold. Head in the way. So we're going to come down and I'm going to start building up. Now that I've got this on there, you kind of know that sweet spot when the paint has sunk into the paper just enough that it's in that workable state where things aren't going to spread too much. And that's what I was waiting on. So as I'm building up colors and I'm letting this dry a little bit down here at the bottom, and now I have a little more control. This is our undersea green. So these are these wine bottles back here, or jars that have liquid in them. I love to play with glass where it has either liquid in it, some doesn't, you know, it magnifies things when you put liquid in there. And I fell in love with painting glass and still life pretty much after my first still life painting. And to me, it's 1,000 little abstract paintings all coming together to create this realistic image. And it fascinates me. And so I really try to keep each section beautiful. So even if it doesn't look exactly, I try, you know, I'm using a photo reference, but even if it doesn't look exactly like that, you know, the water is moving and doing beautiful things. I want each little piece to be beautiful. So if I could magnify in on a section, it could almost be its own abstract painting. But then you step back and it's amazing because you have this realistic piece. So I'll deepen a little more in here. We're going to drop in some more. And I do bring a lot of pigment as I'm coming in. I paint in a transparent way, but I want to get the job done right away. And I'm babysitting this as it's going. It's in this babysitting stage. So I'm watching it to see, is it getting too dark? I mean, is it dark enough? And typically with watercolor, you're adding and adding and adding, right? Our watercolor dries lighter, about 10 to 15% lighter than when you put it on the page. So you're constantly having to monitor. So if you think that it's the way you want it when you put it down, you need to add more. Okay, so we have one little jar, so I'm going to come over here and work on this one. This one's fun. It's got some lights. So these string lights are kind of magnified in this liquid back here. This is my Quin Gold. I'm sorry, my Quin Gold. I don't think I've done a painting without quinacridone gold. It's just a fabulous color. And I have enough masking that I can go over these sections. And I'm being careful to go around my little teacup down here. We're going to get some green. I'm going to get some of my sap green and put that in. And it's important, I wanted to emphasize some of these greens and darks back here because otherwise, if you look at this painting, it could be kind of one note. So I want to make sure we have these values back in here and not all pinks and oranges and reds. I'm going to get some of my undersea green going. So we have these stacked up little teacups, and we're going to have this bright teapot. Now you notice I have only masked out the top section. So the way I paint, like I said, can be quite slow, and we all have good intentions, right? Of starting a painting and finishing right away. Does that always happen? No. So I have learned from practice, you know, you don't want the masking fluid to sit on there forever. So I have learned that I need to mask in stages. So today you can see I plan in this section to finish this top part, hopefully, in my allotted time, and then I will move on to the other part, which is masked. So we've got our Quin Gold, our undersea green, and our Aussie red gold all playing around up here. I'm going to get a little more of my undersea green. And the other color I would like, let's see if I can find it, is my quinacridone burnt orange, another beautiful color. So I'm going to get some of my quinacridone burnt orange. And since I'm putting it over here in this side, I want to make sure we have this color sprinkled in throughout, right? So if you use one color, the idea that I always stick with is to put it at least in 3 places. You want to sprinkle in colors in 3 places at least, an odd number, and you want them triangulated if you can. So a triangle triangle shape is the strongest shape, and it keeps your eye kind of focusing around. So if I have Quinn burnt orange here, Quinn burnt orange here, as long as I have it down in here, I'll have a triangulation of that color. I just wrote a nice article for the Watercolor Artist magazine and on the rule of odds, because I'd like to have odd objects in my still life. It's more interesting. And that's some of my bismuth vanadate. So let's get this dark enough in here. I'm going to get some of my undersea green. I'm going to come back and get some of that Quinn burnt orange. Throw that in. We're going to drop some in here. We're going to come around the edge of this and pull in some of those darks. All right, so now let's come over. We can do the bottom part of this jar, this bottle back here. This is our straight up undersea green. I'm getting this as dark, so here is pretty much my darkest dark. And I want to establish that right away in the beginning, so I'm coming in with quite a bit of pigment. That's one thing my students that I teach, I have to get used to a little less water and a little more pigment, because I want it nice and saturated. I'm going to come in with my Quinn gold. I probably should have gone the other direction. Look at a little Quinn gold down here. Too much on my brush. Okay. Let's come over to this bottle. It's a little lighter. I'm going to start with my bismuth vanadate. We're going to put that in here. I'm going to switch to my size 8 since we have a bigger section over here. And these brushes I'm using are from Japan, but they are a synthetic. I've gone back and forth between synthetic and natural hair brushes. And I like the spring that I get from the synthetic. And I've just gotten used to the amount of water that these hold. That's our bismuth vanadate. Now I'm going to come in with some sap, a little bit of sap green right here in the middle. Bismuth vanadate yellow. And I do have some dot cards up here. You're welcome afterwards to come up and get, and they have most of these colors on there. And they have enough paint for you to try a little. I'm going to use my Quinn burnt orange, mixing with that. So that Quinn burnt orange mixing with the sap green just takes it down a little bit, dulls it a little, and gets the color that we're going for, kind of an olivey, earthy green. We're going to come up, and we're going to get a little more of our sap green. I'm going to drop in a little of that bismuth vanadate. I want to show you, see how it just kind of pushes out. It's such a nice, bold color, opacity of it. And I'm going to get a little of our Aussie red gold. And some Quinn gold. And not only does this kind of capture what I feel when you see like the city of Tokyo with the lights and the craziness, but also just the ritual and the tea ceremonies and all of the tradition was what I was capturing in this as well as my others in this series. This is my sap green again. We'll come in with a little of our quinacridone burnt orange. But see how fun, people sometimes are intimidated by painting realism or glass, but look how fun, I feel like this is fun when you're playing and you're getting all these mixes in the paint, and they're naturally kind of flowing together. undersea green. I'm going to get this dark enough down in here. And I'm going to get a little of my bismuth Band-Aid at the bottom. I have this highlight. The bottom of these bottles will have this nice little highlight at the bottom where the light's coming through. And I would say light is probably one of my biggest muses in art. I'm always trying to capture either dramatic light or bright sunlight. I also, in this exhibit, have some light bulbs. I painted light bulbs. So those came about because they were going to start banning incandescent light bulbs in the United States. And it just made me really, caught me off guard, and I thought that's the light that has been around since the beginning of light bulbs, and artists have, you know, worked under and used, and so I wanted to start painting those, and that series was called Band. So then came about this idea of painting kind of these utilitarian objects, whether they're teapots or wine bottles or things that we see every day, and we use them and don't think about how beautiful they are on their own. And so it's this idea of these utilitarian workhorses. How can we show how gorgeous they are and let them have their moment of beauty? So I'm really trying to pay respect to these objects that we all see and use. This is my undersea green here. Come back on this side. I'm going to get a little bit of this background back here. I'm going to use my undersea green. It's dry enough. It's not going to go into that bottle next door. And that went from undersea green to quin gold, and now I'm going to go back to my bismuth vanadate, which is that brighter, prettier yellow, right up in there. And then as we work down into these cups, so we're seeing the bottles through these glass cups, and then they're stacked up. So they have their own, lots of things going on. So I really try to paint what I see and get lost in the shapes, the colors, and the relationships. Everything we paint is about shapes, colors, and relationships. And if we can get lost in that, whether you turn your paper upside down so you can't label it, you know, our brain wants to label everything. What am I painting? What part is this? And actually what you need to do is forget about what you're painting and just look at shapes, colors, and relationships and how they are forming next to each other. So by zooming in like I am, it helps me to not think about what I'm painting, but just shapes, colors, and relationships. And the more we can just paint what we see, for me, that's what I'm doing with these references. And I've spent a long time composing these photo references and getting them exactly the way I want them. And so I'm spending my time trying to recreate what I'm seeing. I grew up with a father who's a photographer, and we were always stopping for him to take pictures when I was younger on trips. So every trip seemed like it took an eternity to get anywhere, because we were always stopping to compose a photo. But now I'm thankful because I think that way. I look at the world as one big composition. I brought that over a little too far, but that's okay. So we're going to come over here with quin gold. And so we're painting in between. So if I'm painting at home, I'm painting a little slower. I'm letting this dry in between, and I would end up probably taking masking off in between and working, you know, getting each area to completion. But here we're on fast forward. Let's get some of that quin burnt orange in here. Complete those colors that are in that bottle back behind. We'll get a little of our bismuth vanadate down here. Get a little of our Quinn Gold. Back to our undersea green. And this masking is helping me because I'm not having to think as much about painting around things. Anything that deters the end result. So if I was painting around all this versus using masking, I would have to be thinking a lot more about staying out of areas and maybe not having as nice. And I attempted to paint without masking, and the results are better for me this way. But it's all what we get used to and what we like. And like I said, masking is an art form of its own. I'm going to drop in some undersea green right in there. So this is a lighter area right in here. So I don't want it to be bright white. Rinse that green out of there. I don't want it to be bright white, so I'm going to get a little bit of water, and we're going to pull from the color right around just to soften. So our whitest, all these masked areas are the brightest highlights, right? The whitest whites. And we want to reserve those sparkles for that. So everything else has to tone down, and it can't be bright white of the paper. Come in here, we're getting a little undersea green. And we're going to, I'm sorry, that was Aussie Red Gold, and now we're going to go into our undersea green. Right in there. Okay. Let's come to a little handle. Once again, we have lots of masking on this little handle. I'm going to get some of my Quinn Gold. Switch up to my Bismuth Vanadate. And now we've got to get some more values in there. We're going to get our undersea green and drop that into some of these places. Now when you have a wet on wet and it's very liquidy, the way you can control having your paint that you're bringing in, like I just did, not travel as much, is I will use a creamier consistency. So if this is really wet, I come in with a creamier consistency of paint and it stays put a little better. It won't travel as much. Now if I came in with a real liquidy wash on top of that, it's a lot of water and it's going to create soup and it's just going to keep moving. All right, let's come over here on this side. Get some of my Aussie Red Gold. And some undersea green. Gonna kind of come in light and map this in at the bottom down here. Get some of our Bismuth Vanadate and put it around this light. Anytime I have a light that's a little fairy light masked out, I want to put a little glow around it. So I put that Bismuth Vanadate right around it. Let's come in with a little of our Quinn Burnt Orange. We want to keep this color story consistent. I want to have the same colors throughout this background back here. It's important. Okay. And then I'm going to get a little more of my Quinn Burnt Orange, and we're going to put it up here on the sides. And see how I did a creamier consistency, so it's not traveling as much. And I don't reconstitute my pans I've gotten used to painting in pan form, so the dry paints. I started out that way when I first started painting. I was living in Germany, and the only art store that was near me had pans, no tubes. So I learned to paint with pans. And so that's what I continue to do. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's all what we get used to doing, and we just try to do the techniques we have and start to master what we're good, what works for us. I'm going to use some of my Quinn Gold over here. I'm going to work on the background a little bit. Okay, let's come down to the side of this cup. We're going to get our bismuth vanadate in the center here. I don't have very much masking in here, so maybe I'll switch now. All right, I'm going to switch to my next panel. Okay, so now you can see these colors back here. See how we've continued that? Same idea and everything. So I'm going to show you now. I'm going to take off a little masking back here so I can show you how I clean up and resolve an area. So I have my trusty rubber cement pickup. They sell these very affordably. Please use one. It's my biggest pet peeve when I see artists using their fingers. If you're in a pinch, you can use cling wrap. So we're going to take off some of this masking back here to show you the sparkle of what we just painted. I'll do this section. See how important all that masking was to keep that sparkle. See the difference from this side to this side? Isn't it like magic? All this sparkle just pops out all of a sudden. So now this is where I have a couple of tools that I use. I have my trusty old, this is an old synthetic that is completely worn out. Do you see? He's having a bad hair day. You see that? And then I have some of these that are like erasers or eradicators, and so they're stiffer. So this one I like because of his bad hair day. He comes in, and I get a little bit of water, and you come over here and get rid of most of it, so it's a damp brush, like a thirsty brush, and you're going to come in. I come in from the white, where I peeled that masking off, and I'm going to go out. I don't want to bring paint in. I'm going to go out. So I'm going to come onto this line, and we're going to soften this line. It does two things. It softens that hard edge really easily, and it pulls a little glow. Do you see that glow that's starting to happen right there? So we'll soften this piece right here. So this is the process that I would be doing all throughout this painting, where I'm coming in and softening. And on top of that, let's say we don't want every single one of these sparkles to be bright like that. So you just take a thirsty brush, you just get a little water, I come over here and I get rid of most of it off the thing, and then I'm going to come on my paper towel, and then I'm going to come over here and just using the color around it. See how I've just toned that down just slightly? So I don't want every single sparkle to be bright white. It has to be interesting, so we complex. There's layers of this. The other thing you can do is you can paint an area and mask on top of it. You have to let it dry completely. You can add masking fluid on top, and then you can also get levels of sparkle and color that way. But see how just softening some, toning some down on this bottle. I'm going to soften the top part of this, leave the bottom part. We're softening it, and we're just making it a little more realistic that way. We've got all these complex levels now. Just by pulling the color around it, we're getting different shades that are coming into these areas. And see, just by softening and going in from the middle, pushing out, I'm getting a glow around that. And you always have your trusty paper towel nearby so you can make sure you reserve those whites and keep them nice and bright. So that's how I would soften this entire piece at the end. And it really doesn't take that much time for the amount of the look that we're getting. It's completely worth the amount of time. The other thing I can do is I can get a little bit of color and put it on top. So if I want to soften an area up here, but I want to do it with bright yellow, I can throw that bright yellow right on top of an area, so I can add paint back in if you were to mask too much or you want to fix that. And so now I'm going to stand back. It's always important to stand back and look, squint and look, and see that you have your values where you want them and everything in the right place. So we're going to come down and we're going to start on this teapot to show you how I handle the oranges. Now, oranges and reds can be hard because you want to get them bright and beautiful, so they take some glazing. So I'm going to show you that process. So I'm going to start just like I did last time. I'm going to find myself with my masking, and I'm going to come in with my light color. So I'm mapping shapes in. I'm figuring out where I am, and I'm masking shapes in. So this is my bismuth vanadate, and I'm going to come in right around here, and I'm going to find this ring that's right in this area of the teapot. And we're going to come in and get this glow happening. I'm going to switch to my size 4. So I'm going back and forth to use my size 8 and 4. I'm going to come in with Pyro Orange now. So Pyro Orange is this really bright, beautiful orange. I'm going to come in with that under here. And so I'm leaving room for this yellow, but I'm also starting while it's wet, so it's giving a nice soft edge. It's always important in paintings to have some mixes of hard edges and soft edges and lost edges. So in other words, sometimes we don't have the edge of a complete edge of something. It might disappear into the background. So it's more interesting to have a mix of all of those things. I like to play with the backgrounds a lot and have kind of blurred backgrounds. And then you've got really soft and lost edges back there. I'm going to switch now to my yellow, to my bismuth vanadate, and get some of that in here. And look how nicely the orange and the yellow play together. And that's the other good thing, when you're painting, you always are wanting to experiment with your paints. Some paints are best friends, some paints fight each other. So you want to know which ones are friends and work well together, and that comes with trial and error, or watching demos like this where you can say, oh, I know these work together. All right, so that's my bismuth vanadate. I'm going to come back to my Pyro Orange. And I'm coming around this outer rim. So I'm kind of doing in a section at a time. I'm going to come back in with some of my yellow in here. And that bismuth vanadate, see how I talked about being like a bully color? It's pushing out. So it is my true favorite lemony yellow color. And look how nicely that they play together. Aren't they pretty? So now let's get our Pyro Red. We're going to start getting some depth here. So I've got my Pyro Red, and I'm coming in and getting some darker colors right in here. And we'll get some Pyro Red in here. And if you have an area that starts to dry, like over here, I'm getting a little bit of a hard edge. So I'm going to come in with a thirsty brush. I'm getting rid of most of the water, clean water, and I'm just going to come in and soften that edge so that we can, get this wet again. And if we need to, we add just a little water back into this section just to keep it moving the way we want to. I try not to use a hair dryer. I feel it dulls the colors a little bit. I'm going to get now into my Bordeaux, which is a beautiful color. And this is going to we're getting our darkest dark now for the reds. It's going to get even darker and more intense in here. I'm going to add that in with this fiery little teapot. Okay. Well, let's come back here with our Pyro Orange. And if we get too many blooms, I'm getting some blooming down here, which isn't terrible in a pot of water, right? It can work for us. But we can take a thirsty brush, so I've gotten rid of most of the water, and I can just kind of babysit. and control and push things back where I want them if it's starting to spread too much. So I'm trying to do kind of an outer rim back here. Let's get our pyrrole red. In here. And we'll get a little of our Bordeaux so that we're paying attention. I'm looking at where my darkest darks are and dropping those in as I'm going around to keep this glow going. Now let's come out here to our outer rim. Now I need to pay attention to where the yellows are. And this masking is going to help us tremendously at the end as we pull it off and we have all of our sparkles back there, just like we did with the background. Let's get our bismuth vanadate and put it in here. And I can throw some in. Now it's spreading a little where I don't want it, so I'm getting my thirsty brush and just pushing it back out. Let's get our pyro orange. My teapot grew a little over there, but I can fix that. That's the challenge you have with when you're doing circles or ellipses, circles in perspective, is to make sure they don't start growing and growing until you have this wonky teapot. So I'll have to get my teapot back and wonk right there. So you're kind of always checking as you're going. I get a little of my Bordeaux. It's not a rich, beautiful color. Drop it in there. Let's get our pyro orange and come back over here. So we want this teapot to just be on fire. It's kind of the star of our show down here. And that's another thing I like to do when I'm painting is I never start on the star of the show. Now, kind of the way that I paint, I start kind of systematically from one section to another. So normally I'm starting in an area that isn't where your eye is directly going to go. But we need an adjustment period to get used to our palette, to get used to how the paints work together, and get our kind of in the groove of things. So when I do that, I always start somewhere that is not the star of the show, which I would consider this guy up front the star of the show. See if we can pull him in wonk there. Okay. I'm going to get a little bit of my pyrrole red. Down here. And we'll get some of our Bordeaux. So we're just continuing. I have kind of my light, medium, and dark, light, medium, and dark, and I want to continue that as I go around. All right, so we have this nice area in here that is really dark, right in here, and it's kind of the bottom of that teapot showing up through the lids. We have so many circles happening, right? So we're going to come in now, and I'm going to start with my pyrrole red, because I always start with a little lighter color. We're going to end up with our Bordeaux, but I want to start with a little lighter color, so I'm going to get this mapped in with my pyrrole red. And so I've got a little hard edge there that I don't want, so we can come in with just a little thirsty brush and kind of knock that back. And then we're going to come in with the pyrrole red into this shape over here. Get our bigger brush when we're in a bigger space. So even if I were painting this as a full sheet, this is a quarter sheet. If I was painting this as a full sheet, I would still be using these brushes, these 4s and 8s, because I've gotten used to them. I'll drop something. All right, so I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm going to come around the edge. I want soft edges, so I'm getting a thirsty brush and pulling that in. And a full sheet painting normally can take me 4 weeks to a month. So I'm in serious fast painting mode right now. And drop a little of my bismuth vanadate back in here. That's the nice thing about this yellow. I can come in and get some of my lights back in by dropping that bismuth vanadate back on top. See how nicely that does that? All right, so now we're going to get our Bordeaux. So I talked about we have a wet situation. I'm coming in, I want to keep it kind of controlled, so I'm going to get a creamier bit of this Bordeaux. And I will sometimes come back in the backs of these lids and kind of figure out where I am on the, if you were to look at this as like a dairy product, am I in a skim milk, or am I in a butter, or am I in a cream? So we're kind of in a cream consistency right now. Butter would be right out of the tube. So this is our Bordeaux. And we're getting this dark area where the bottom of that teapot is. Okay, thank you. There's the bottom of that teapot. All right, so we have our dark color. So we might need to get even darker, so I'm going to add a little more right in there, and then we'll play with that. If we need to get darker than that, I would go into my purples. Okay. We're going to come up. We're going to do a little bit of this rim. I'll start with my bismuth vanadate. We'll come back over here and start back in this section. We continue our circles. Circle upon circle upon circle. Not having to worry about where our brightest white is, because it's all masked for us. This is still fairly wet down here, so I'm going to keep it. I don't want that Bordeaux to come in too much. So I brought a little creamier bit of my bismuth vanadate. Okay, I'll clean up any little blooms we have. There, with a thirsty brush. Keep our circle in a circle. Come in this middle section. I'm going to come in with Pyro Orange. And if I have a color that starts to get a little dull, I like to go in. So let me finish the orange up here and I'll show you. I like to glaze these colors. So these reds and oranges are nice to glaze with. So if you're looking kind of for a cherry red, it's hard sometimes to find that. So if you glaze over top a red with an orange, this bright orange, then you get that cherry red back. And I'll show you over here in a second. Get this section in here. So I'm going to show you. So down here, as it's drying, it might be getting a little dull. So if I want to pop in a little color, I come back and I glaze this with a nice transparent layer of that pyro orange. And I'm able to pop that brightness back out and make it more of a bright, fiery color. My business vanity, because anywhere there's these little areas, and I want anywhere that there's lights, I want them to be nice and bright. I'm glazing, I'm doing another little layer over here of our yellow. Okay, and I'll come in up here with our, soften this right here. And I'm going to come in up here with our Bordeaux. Get that inside of that shape. With our darkest dark. I try to always go in kind of circles. When it's a circle, stay in a circle pattern. And we have some darker in here, so I'm going to get into my carbazole violet, which is this darker purple color, and drop a little in here for that darkness. So that's where I would go to get even darker, to match the intensity of the undersea green we had up top. So now you kind of see how I start these layers out, and then I keep refining and refining. So I'm going to pull out my last board. And here you have it as you keep refining. And this has the masking pulled off of this one. So then I would still keep coming in and getting even darker where it needs to be darker. With our Bordeaux. And then I would clean up any sparkles. So this is when you can use some of the thinner brushes, any sparkles that need to be softened or cleaned up. You come in with this eraser, which is that stiff bristled brush, and you just soften any areas that need to be softened. With that brush. And then I can also come in like we did earlier and knock down anything that is too bright. So I get a little of my Quinn Gold or my Business Vanity, and we can just knock down any highlights that are too bright. Okay, with that color. Right in here, I'll knock down a little of that. And you can do just plain water too, in there. But I hope that you have enjoyed this, showing you a little of how to play with these masking and these wet-on-wets together and layering and glazing. So I hope that you've enjoyed this demonstration. Thank you guys for watching very much.